So, hey everyone, this is Neal, and I am here with Shaun today. And I've gotten to know Shaun a little bit, probably over the span of, I would wager, 6 to 9 months, mostly on Chad live streams, but a few other things. And one thing that always struck me about Shaun is he was slow to speak, but wise in what you brought forward. The treasure that you brought forward out of your heart, it was always unique, and not only unique, but I would say something that stuck with me. And so I invited Shaun here today, mainly to get to know Shaun better. But those who are familiar with me and my thinking, I think one thing we're able to do with this technology is almost use the internet against itself in some ways, in that in you being able to bring forth the things that you're interested in, the things that you're thinking about, we can make that known or understood or pose those questions to a broader group without you having to individually pose those same questions over and over and over to like 50 people. And that's really the beauty of TLC as I see it, is this place where in let's say like a normal small group community or church for that matter, like to get to know each individual person, have them tell like a 2 hour rando or a conversation of like who they are, to have that, to do that individually, it's it's difficult and also time consuming. And I think that's something that's really amazing about this space, is we're able to bring the treasures that are each from our individual backgrounds and within our minds and our hearts, out to this small group. So yeah, that thanks for joining us, Shaun. If you want to introduce yourself a little bit.
Well, great. Um, I I guess first thing, we must be careful. You mentioned that it's I'm slow to speak, but then when I do, it's very relevant. So let's just assume the first half of this might be irrelevant nonsense, just because I haven't had time to like really observe what's going on. Uh, but for me, just as a matter of background, I work as a professional nerd. I live in the Salt Lake Valley in Utah. I come from the LDS tradition, and I would want to just throw out a differentiator of you can talk about Mormon without actually referring to LDS, since there are so many branches. I mean, it gets into that old thing I like to say over and over of there's nothing more Christian than a good schism, and in that way, Mormons are just as Christian as anyone else. So, but I grew up in the church that seemed to have acquired the most in numbers and whatnot. Um, but I've also, you know, I'm on the heresy watch list, if it were, as it were.
I remember that was the first time you popped into a stream and we were talking about that, and Chad and I were trying to give you some, well, have you talked to this? Have you done this? And you could tell, like, as I was watching your face, I could just tell, like, nah, this guy's been through the gauntlet. Like we're giving him kind of the noob advice, and he's just tolerating us, very respectfully, very gently. And so that was enjoyable. But yeah.
Well, there's a thing that happens once you've seen some things, and it's like I very much like appreciate where the advice was coming from. Like, and it's very much one of those things of no, I know what this path looks like. I have seen others on it, and now it gets to be my turn. So, but yeah, but that situation is in a pretty stable state at this moment. I have accepted uh my being out of congruence enough that I'm not seeking a temple recommend, but at the same time, I have access to temple teachings with more depth than what is actually being presented in the LDS temples. And so at this point, I am. I am waiting for the Holy Spirit to be my guide, and for uh, that direct experience to be more what I'm aiming for. And so
This this might
I
be an
I don't
interesting question to ask, but have you had any dreams about it?
um I mean, not about that specifically. Um Actually, okay, I'm speaking of dreams. Let's see. We have that there are more pages in here than I thought. Let's see. I'm okay. So today's the 15th. Okay. Tonight will be the 2-year anniversary of the dream that I had, uh, where I believe I met a representation of the mother, because it was
All
on the
right.
morning of October 16th, 2023, that I wrote it down, which that was an extremely interesting dream. And okay, I'm actually going to throw this out there. This is funny. Um, it was 2 years ago that I began to have a sense that something was missing. Uh, you know, like at this point, I would call it something was missing in the cosmology. And the thing that was missing, I thought, was the mother. I I was trying to, uh, I was trying to reconcile some of the things that I had heard, just kind of hints here and there, that she existed in the ancient religions. And in fact, there was one day, Paul Vanderklay was talking about this book, that was, what it's actually on my shelf over there.
Mircea Eliade? Eliada? No, or
The
no.
Yeah, it's like the religion of Israel, in the well, here, I'll grab the book. It's right
Sure.
here. Okay. So it's the religion of Israel from its beginnings to the Babylonian exile. So it's the
Yehezkel Kaufman.
yes. So he had mentioned that just on one of his, I want to say it was just one of his Friday streams, that he was doing. And I decided to pick it up because, like, some of the things that I had heard hinted at, like, she exists, uh, in the religion before the end of the first temple period. And uh, what was really interesting to me about that is, at the same time, I also started learning things about, kind of tie-ins into the Mormon, uh, view of things, because the whole idea of the Book of Mormon is that you have people who are escaping Jerusalem before the Babylonian exile, because basically Jerusalem had become wicked enough and had rejected their God to the point that there were now going to be consequences for it. No, they would no longer be protected. And and I say no longer be protected because I don't think of God as someone who attacks people. It's someone who looks after people until they're not turning to him anymore. And then it's like, well, you're kind of on your own since you don't want me. Um, but it's interesting because there are hints in the Book of Mormon, like the Lehi's vision of the tree of life, and how the tree was removed from the temple before, Jerusalem was sacked, and that symbolism of the tree being the mother, or being the representation of the mother that was part of the worship.
That's interesting. I mean, whenever I think of a tree biblically now, I'm always thinking of the connection between heaven and earth. Um, but in many ways, the mother is that connection between heaven and earth because the mother is that by which new spirit comes into the world. It's only through the
Yes.
mother. Okay, keep going, but this is fascinating.
So, but basically, there was also a part of me that was questioning how many of the dysfunctions in our society, but also some of my own dysfunctions, come from a an incorrect or a non-functioning relationship with the feminine. So, I basically I was looking for her to make sure that I was properly oriented with the feminine. And, because it's very easy to get overly masculine when we are focusing on a masculine only God, or at least a God whose masculine side is the primary one we talk about. Um, and so that was the search I was going through. Now, this dream I had was very interesting. Um, in fact, I credit the things that I learned listening to Jordan Peterson in his biblical series and in some of his maps of meaning work, and talking just about like how the symbols work, uh, and also listening to Jonathan Peugeot. Like, I credit the two of them with the main parts of my symbolic education, um, which I don't know how many people from a LDS or Mormon background are listening to specifically that stuff on symbolism, uh, but they, being familiar with their work, gave me a framework for actually understanding this dream that I had, because it started off, we were out in this, kind of open plaza area, me and a number of people that I was friends with, and there was, I want to say there was some variety of celebration, might have been someone's birthday, um, and we're just hanging out. There's a lot of water features around, but the day is kind of waning, and it's getting time for everyone to head home. Uh, there was a young woman who was with us, and like we were at actually at a train station. Everyone's kind of getting on trains that go the various places they need to go to get home. And before I could go get on the train that I was supposed to get on, she pushes me onto the wrong train and hops on as well, and it leaves immediately, and we get taken somewhere completely different. And uh, we end up just in another part of town, and we're walking around because now there's not like a convenient way to get back to where we had been. Um, and like there are a few things that happen. One of which is like there was some weird thing she did to stumble, and I laughed at her, and then I'm like, ooh, that was kind of a jerk thing to do. Uh, but getting to the point where it was, the sun was setting, and it was probably about time to get home. She starts, she says, "Oh, I've got something for you," and she hands me a gift, and I don't remember what the gift is. I don't remember what any of them are. And then she says, "Actually, there's another one." And well, there's another one here too. And basically, uh, you know, she gives me gift after gift, like to the point that it's starting to get awkward. Like it's like I don't know what to do with all these. In fact, real quick, I'm going to cut to our outside camera just so you, I want to illustrate for scale. Like, imagine this section of my backyard, right? My backyard that's just right out the window here. Imagine just being handed gift after gift, such that that whole area that you can see is piled up with stacks of gifts as tall as you or me, just like individual piles all through it. And like just being given one at a time. So it's not a small number of things I was being given by her at this time. And this giving goes on until like it you can see the sky starting to get light again because it's almost time for the sun to come up. So this is like the entire night it took to receive all these things. And as the sun's coming up, there are three like pickup trucks and utility trailers that pull up that are like and a bunch of people that are just friends, family, everyone who's part of my life. And they just walk in and they're like they just start packing out all the gifts. So I to help me get them home. And it's really interesting because the that's basically loading it all up so I can get it all home is kind of where the dream ends. Now, there's more nuance and detail to the dream here. Uh but I wasn't planning on talking about this today. And so I didn't really refresh the, 2 or 3 pages of written notes I've got here uh before starting to tell you about it. But the key thing here is that what I learned from this dream is that we talk about our heavenly Father, but we also have our heavenly Mother, and we have the masculine order and we have the feminine chaos, and out of the feminine, we're able to take chaos, or they are able to take chaos and turn it into something orderly that is living, right? That's the symbolism of the womb. What I learned from this is a couple of things. One, if I had control over every situation that was uncomfortable and surprising in my life, I would not have been able to be in a place to receive the things that they have for me. It is through those difficulties and through being put in those difficult, problematic situations that that things are put in positions to be better for me. And and it's very interesting to me that that is how it works. And I've looked at that, and like I can look back at every problematic situation I've been through, and then the things that came next. And some may call it survivorship bias. I know very well that there can be some of that to this, but at the same time, I am not going to rob our parents of that credit, because what I gathered is that it is specifically a an aspect of the feminine part of the Elohim that is able to take these things that are just absolute chaos that come to us and turn them into these gifts that are for us and for everyone around us. But it's now, tonight will be 2 years since I had that dream, and it has absolutely been orienting for me and calming for me because I can look at every sign of trouble and I can say, they already showed me how these uncomfortable situations that don't I don't know how they're going to work out are going to be something that they can use for my benefit and use to like put me in the right place for where they need me or for where I otherwise just need to be. And I'm I am very comfortable in my life at this moment. I make no imagination that it is by my own wisdom that I have gotten here at this point. Like that's not a thing. Uh I they have given me great gifts so that I may be as comfortable as I am. And at this point, like I just need to, if nothing else, if I don't have any other guidance on what I should be doing with my life, the next thing is to take my comfort and see if I can help turn it into other people's comfort through, application of good old fashioned Abrahamic hospitality. But yeah, so dreams are orienting for me sometimes.
That's really beautiful. Oh man. Thank you for sharing that, even though it's unexpected. Um, that brought many things to my mind. I don't even, when you were talking about survivorship bias, there's so many reasons for me to think that my own path, especially the last 8 years or so, is like wishful thinking, survivorship bias, uh, finding meaning amidst things that are just luck of the draw, all this stuff. And one thing that Peterson taught me is that um, you can choose otherwise, and that our choices in our beliefs matter significantly, extremely orienting. And when I had one thing happen to me that I thought was impossible without drugs and happened to me in a church, at that point I decided to start choosing to believe. And then there was a period of time when I was becoming Christian, Roman Catholic, but beyond that, returning to faith, there was a point in time where I kind of abstracted myself out of that, where I said, well, maybe I can be one of those people that sort of like lives outside of it and I don't have to practice it myself, but I can value it and appreciate it and love it. And every time that I tried to disassociate myself from that, my depression would just roar back with a vengeance. Like it was every time I tried to say, nope, this didn't apply to me, it was like God saying, okay, enjoy, like, the consequences. And, and so after enough of that, then it's just, we had a Bible study yesterday where, I said something that really irritated a member of our Bible study, but I meant it. And what I said was that I think the single biggest cause of the mental health crisis is pride, and she did not like that
But
one
it's
bit.
true.
Yeah, and because um the point I was trying to make there is, and Chad has made this point before to me, that discernment is really two things. It's not only about what you choose, but it's what you give up and what you're willing to give up. And I think more so, sorry, this is kind of getting off the point of your dream, but I think more so today, the biggest source of pride is this presumption to know who we are, what we're meant to be, what we're meant to value, and we're stuck in these sort of prisons of um, predisposition, or prisons of presumption. Maybe a prison of presumption is the best way of putting it.
I mean, it has
And
better alliteration.
yeah, and and that a pill, or whatever, talk therapy or whatever it is it getting to the underlying thing, and is the underlying thing something that you're holding on to so tightly that, like, I have to be this or I have to be that. And maybe it's like letting go of that feels like a death, that you yourself are dying, because that's a cornerstone of your identity. And then what's amazing is, like, when you let go of that, something catches you, like something comes back to you, something returns, something fills you. um and that's what I mean by pride. It's the unwillingness to let go of the things that are um that define us and are nevertheless destroying us. um yeah, maybe I'll pause there and see what thoughts you have.
You know, I think one of the things that really jumped out to me there is like the things that are one of the things that I keep thinking about as I'm considering how I'm oriented with the world is it's funny how often identity comes up. And it's amazing how much identity is used for stoking conflict. And so this gets into an interesting thing. Um, I just want to throw out some background of like this bumps into some of the stories that I was kind of reviewing and thinking about. So in my faith and the things that I study that bring me meaning, I very much include the Bible. Like I have abandoned King James because King James is very beautiful lack of clarity. So I had actually asked a friend like which translation do you suppose Richard Rohr is quoting from in his talks? And she had suggested the NRSV, and so I got a copy of the NRSV, and I tell you what, after my I read one chapter. It was James 1, and at the end of that chapter, I don't know why it spoke to me so strongly. Um, but it was the darndest thing. I wept for 10 minutes. Like I don't know why. Like I don't fully understand where it all came from, but it was a thing where I really understood King James to be a very beautiful stumbling block. And I find it interesting that my church is very set on it's King James is what we study. We don't really bring anything else with us to church. And I look at that now and it's like at a certain point you're not orienting yourselves to understanding. You're orienting yourselves to tradition. And sometimes tradition itself can be a stumbling block to understanding. But beyond the Bible, you know, being the person of LDS background I am, I also have Book of Mormon. And this, I tell you what, this has been extremely orienting for me. Um, People always want to separate religion and politics. I don't know how to do that anymore. Now, this isn't to say that I'm here for a theocracy. In fact, I I do believe that the way we manage our society and govern it is so completely how to say so completely unsustainable it's going to fall over. And all of my reasons for it are found in these books. Like I look at the parable of the trees in Judges 9, and I ponder that, and it's like, okay, we everyone who is worth following doesn't want to do it. And so all of us as trees are waiting for the bramble to cast a big enough shadow to shade us. And that's just not going to work. Um, but the next thing, I'm the the next book. There's actually a story in the Book of Mormon about a fellow named Hagoth who builds some ships and they sail off to the land northward, and uh, eventually they're just never heard from again. Growing up and for years, I always understood that it was basically a footnote. I wonder who this Hagoth the guy is. It says he was a very curious sort of person. I don't know if that's curious as in, he's wondering, he's got a lot of questions, or curious as in everyone thinks he's a little strange. Sounds relatable to me. Um, but I mentioned that story because we have the Demenha record, which is a good ream and a half of, you know, not tiny text, but the Demenha record starts with the Book of Hagoth. And its origin is Native American records that were translated. Uh, well, first off, the Book of Mormon is said to have been translated by Joseph Smith uh, through the gift and power of God. This is going to be a recurring theme because the fellow who is part of the translation council that translated this says that they translate when they are essentially in a visionary state. And that is going to become a recurring theme later for the next record. But basically, this follows the story of the people who left uh, with Hagoth. And it's actually a mixed group of people. And this gets into the identity thing. So in the Book of Mormon, you've got Nephites and you've got Lamanites, descendants from the first two sons of Lehi and descendants from the rest of the sons of Lehi. And as a matter of who they settled with and intermarried with, uh, number one, they weren't completely alone in the land. Uh, like if you look at Mesoamerican history or even just American history, uh, there's a lot of different groups that were here before Lehi arrived, and so it's really a question of who they integrated with when they arrived and what societies they kind of had strong influence over. But the identity thing comes up in here because in the beginning of this, they decide they need a new name to call themselves. And the name they pick is the Nemenha. And no more are they Lamanite or Nephite. They are just Nemenha. And they've got some Nemenha that are lighter skinned, and they've got some Nemenha that are a little more tan. And that, has to do with who they intermarried with for, 500 some odd years after they first arrived. So, but the thing is, when they as a group decide they're going to take on this new identity of people who just love and want to follow God instead of their ancestral identity, there's something about that allows them to actually be at peace and have unity with each other. And there's something, it would appear to be damaging about being too attached to our identity or our groups that we're a part of, because we can use that identity, or that identity can be used in ways that are invisible to us to help convince us that people are our enemies when they don't need to be.
It reminds me of don't put old wine, or sorry, new wine into old wineskins, and that the new wine has to go into a new wineskin, a new container that binds that wine together. That's what it, yeah.
That is absolutely appropriate. Yes. Because it is very much that that whole um, they were starting a new thing. In fact, when they went on their voyage, it's interesting because first off, um, the Nemenhall record only works if you accept that the Nephites and Lamanites were hanging out closer to Central America, or at least, there is the model put forth by people like you know Chief Mitiga, who talk about uh, the Mulekites in the Book of Mormon actually would have been more of the Ojibwe up in the Great Lakes, because they've got their story of how their star family lines originated. Because around 600 BC, there was an elder and a young boy who arrived, and uh, two sisters that came with them, and the two sisters became the mothers of the star family lines. And the young boy and the elder that was with him actually went around and set up their teaching lodges. And uh, basically, the understanding I have from that is that they brought what was being lost in the uh, end of the First Temple period to the people here, and the worship that is among the Ojibwe today is a continuation of that tradition still. So,
And it differs significantly from surrounding tribes relative
um,
to them.
I don't know because they've had a lot of time to mix with each other. But there are things that are specific to them, yes.
Interesting.
And now they also have a lot of exchange with the Mayans, and there are people today who identify themselves as Mayans. There's a
Hmm.
good number of them who have worked very hard to not assimilate into our society because they're trying to stick with their tradition. And um, if you recall, I did that big fast back in March, and that was at a gathering where they were in ceremony for the spring equinox. And among the things that happened uh, on their uh, on their altar, under their tree where they did their worship, they actually had rabbis place a Torah, and uh, there was they actually had it titled the Nephite record, because Book of Mormon doesn't come from, like, it didn't come from the plates. That was a title that was picked for by people in our age, not a title that was picked on the record. And so to be more in line with their culture and the way that they view things, this is the Nemenhah record. This is about the people of the Nemenhah. And the the Book of Mormon isn't a book of Mormon, like it's not about Mormon. It is the record of the Nephite people. So they call it the Nephite record for these printings that are going to them. Which it's a very appropriate name. So, but they put it on an altar and they sanction them as records that are relevant to the Mayan people. And they're actually getting started with uh, disseminating the teachings of it to Mayans as part of their history, because they identify themselves as children of Lehi. So, from the tribe of Joseph.
Wow.
So, but it's interesting, and actually, there's a this is a total aside. There's a thing in the Book of Mormon where it talks about a prophecy of someone who is a descendant of Joseph, whose name is also Joseph, who will be a prophet that will help reclaim the people uh, who are descendants. Lehi also had a son named Joseph, so like it's specifically those Josephites that are identifying as Mayans, or Mayans are identifying as being that branch of Lehi's family, uh, which was not fully destroyed in the Nephite Lamanite War. A lot of when you've got 6+ kids, you have a lot of different families that come from that in 1,000 years.
Wow.
But there's a footnote in the Book of Mormon that identifies that Joseph, who is a descendant of Joseph, as being Joseph Smith. And that is apparently a change that happened. I've gathered it sometime 50 years after Joseph Smith died. And
Interesting.
before that, it actually uh, it apparently used to say that it was an Indian prophet that would be presented at some point. But someone just really wanted it to be Joseph Smith, and so the footnote got updated, and that's what's in all the current printings.
Interesting.
So
Did it did it only exist as the tablets prior to that point, or
no, like
are there early translations that still exist? I'm saying early 1800s. What I mean. Yeah.
there, yeah, there are printings from the 1800s. Well, I mean, there are printings that don't even have footnotes yet,
Yeah.
but there are, as I understand it, there are printings that have the footnote that says it is an Indian prophet, not not Joseph Smith.
Interesting.
Which, as far as I'm concerned, Joseph did the part that he needed to do. Um, well, yeah, this is where it gets into dangerous territory for
Yeah.
me.
Yeah.
Um,
No, we can go on to
well,
something else.
no, no, it's
Yeah.
I will anything I say, I will stick to what I'm comfortable saying. But the danger here is my church imagines itself as being the only ones authorized and the only ones who seem to be working on this project of uh, gathering the Lord's people. It's hard to gather Israel if you're not hanging out with any Jews. I'm gonna throw that out there. Like, if you think that your goal is the gathering of Israel, it's a problem if the Jews don't want to hang out with you. Just that's the first thing. Um,
Is there Hebrew scholarship within the LDS? You said they
yes,
always use the King James version, but there is Hebrew scholarship.
yeah, yeah. Hugh Nibley did quite a bit in that direction, as I understand it. Um, he's actually one of the really respected people from kind of the prior generation, and his work still sneaks in. And people kind of try to move away from it anymore, but it's it's actually kind of a glaring thing that it's like, well, like, are we going to reject this because it's not all bad? um,
So um, is that having reverberation within the LDS community now? Maybe not top down, but bottom up.
I so what I kind of see happening in the LDS community is, I want to say it was like in the 70s or maybe a little before that, people decided, we really got to standardize what is really what we believe and what isn't. You know, uh, I don't know if it would be fair to call it basically developing a catechism or whatever, but
Confessionality. Yeah.
Um,
You're in. This is the line. You're in or you're out. This is the line right here.
yes. Well, we call it correlation. They have what they call the correlation committee, and correlation they have done a wonderful job. If you wanted to simplify the gospel down to like only the things that are really provable, A plus job, mission accomplished. They did it. But in my observation, in the attempt at distilling the most important parts for inclusion, they have boiled out the life of it.
So the is basically what I'm hearing from you. And let me know if this is off. Is confessionality or the corollary. Sorry, what did you call it?
Correlation, because they
Correlation.
want it
That's it.
all to correlate.
Well, that gets rid of all of the mystical tradition or the prophetic tradition. You can call it what you will, right? The
Uh huh.
prophetic, the mystical within. Yeah. But do you want to elaborate on that?
Uh, yeah. I mean, I think you're hitting the nail on the head with how you're describing it, because that is what has unfortunately been happening. Because there isn't there basically they've boiled it down to all the things that are good territory for apologetics and good enough to have arguments about. And
Very left brain centric.
you
But
might say
where's
very masculine and ordered,
very, yeah, that's exactly where I was going to say. Where's the feminine?
where indeed. And we don't talk about her. We are discouraged from bringing her up at church. And if we do, it's, well, we don't know and we don't talk about her. And there's like an assumption that somehow she needs to be protected. And so we don't talk about her out of respect because she needs to be protected. I am sorry, but Pa Aloe of the Demenha creation story does not need protection. Friggo of the Birkenhall tablets creation story does not need protection. I forget the name of the mother in the Ojibwe creation story that was released as a video earlier this year. When Adam and Eve eat the fruit, the father speaks to Adam. And it's not Adam. Like every one of these has different names for everyone because guess what? They're all from different languages and everybody's just transliterating to English. And so we should not expect the name to be Adam and Eve in all of these various things. Like different language families just have different names. That's just what's going to happen. So in the Ojibwe, the father talks to Adam and the mother talks to Eve. And then the mother turns to the serpent and she has words for him. And it describes in their creation story how she is raising in her energy level as she addresses him to the point that the father and the son both take a step back. And I interpret that in the attitude of, oh, he has messed up. And she
Devouring
is,
mother is angry.
yes, she is going to do what she's going to do. And it is the mother who curses the serpent. And the mother who declares that the seed of Eve will be the origin of what will be able to defeat the serpent. So, like getting back to that theme of looking for the mother, like I have found all these things because I was looking for her. And I have not been disappointed, not in the least. And I think I think one of the things that has the world as disoriented as it is the fact that we are trying to do it all in the masculine way and are we have no frame of reference for the divine feminine and what it means to be in line with the divine feminine. Like I'm not even going to claim to be an expert here. I can't claim that. But I'll tell you this, she matters. She matters a lot. And so, yeah, like I've it's only been in the last few weeks I've read the creation story in here. And there is you're dealing with someone who can nurture but who also can lay down the law. And it's an amazing balance. And you know, it's interesting to think about how mothers are in various cultures. And you know, I don't believe that the feminine is just supposed to be submissive. In fact, when the feminine is submissive to the masculine, that just puts the masculine in a position to make more mistakes that are just harmful for everyone. And, you know, if they're out of alignment, the tension is necessary to help both kind of meet that middle godly place that they need to
Optimal
operate.
grip.
Yeah, absolutely. So I don't know. It's there's a lot there.
Yeah. No, man, I do have a lot of thoughts, and I went on a very similar journey in a lot of ways. And so when I stumbled into Peterson, I had a mystical experience within a Catholic church. And actually that mystical experience started by looking at my wife within the church. Like I turned to my left and everything in that moment was I was sitting in the pew in the middle of church and everything in that moment was beautiful. So my wife was beautiful holding our daughter on her shoulder, and our daughter was a little bit almost two, like, but asleep on her shoulder. And we were in this. It wasn't even a cathedral. It was a nice community church, and it was a beautiful moment. And then I had a feeling come over me, but it was actually looking at her, and I don't really focus on this, but it was almost a Marian pose, right? Because our daughter was asleep on her. I guess Jesus is normally portrayed awake. Um, but it was everything was at peace, everything was still, everything was calm, beautiful. And I remember his conversation with I think it was Matthew Pajot. I think it was Matthew. It was either Jonathan or Matthew, uh, where the feminine is that which poses the frame or poses the problem or poses the question. It creates the space that allows the masculine to then act. And okay, so where this is relevant, I think the single greatest mistake of Protestantism is getting rid of Mary. So you could say it's the removal of all of the saints, like the whole litany of saints. But the Roman Catholic Church puts Mary at the top of that. Mary's the mother of the church. She's also emblematic of the church, almost like a boat that's carrying us all to the promised land, to the shore. Um, and I know in Orthodoxy that Theotokos, but we just say Mary, the Mother of God, Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners now and at the hour of our death. Now, the thing that blew my mind, and this is from a Catholic theologian, his name is Brant Petrie, was is a few things related to Mary. Jesus actually begins his ministry at age 12. The only story that we have, so let me explain that. The only story we have of Jesus between his very early days as an infant and as an adult is that story of the temple at age 12. Um, my understanding and my Jewish brothers and sisters and people who know the history of Judaism better than I do, but my understanding is that when you were a Jewish boy, Second Temple period, you're a Jewish boy at age 12, that is when you can pick your profession. That is when you begin your apprenticeship, basically. Um, and so for 3 days, he's missing from Mary and Joseph, which that's relevant too. And they find him in the temple, which is basically the feminine space that God enters into. They find him in the temple. And Mary says to him, "My son, didn't you know that your father and I have been looking for you?" It's not Joseph who speaks. It's Mary who speaks and says, like, "Jesus, what the heck?" Like, we were really scared. And Jesus says to her, uh, don't don't you know that I'm supposed to be in my father's house? That, like, he's basically beginning his mission right then and there, but it's Mary that stops it. In effect, what Mary's doing is saying, "No, no, 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 no. God, you are not taking away my 12-year-old son from me now. You're not doing it." Like, Mary basically puts pause on the start of Jesus's ministry. And it says, "And he was obedient to them." That's what it says, the line. So Jesus goes back with Mary and Joseph. And then, okay. So fast forward, 18 years. Joseph has since passed away, it's assumed, because he's no longer spoken about. And they're at the wedding at Cana. And Mary says to her son, she's like, Jesus, my son, they have no wine." And Jesus's response, I just love it. It's like, "Woman, what does this have to do with me? Like, why, like, why is it my problem that your friend's wedding doesn't have wine?" And then, like, I could just imagine them exchanging glances. And it's like that subtle feminine signal where Mary knows exactly what she's doing. She knows exactly what she's doing. But she is basically saying in that moment to Jesus, "I am creating the frame. I am creating the space. I am releasing you." This is because she knows, and the reason I can say this is, like, the prophecy in the temple. I think it was Simeon. I could be getting that wrong, but
Yeah.
the prophecy in the temple where Jesus is presented in the temple, and he says, "And a sword will pierce your heart also, so that the thoughts of many hearts shall be revealed." It's a prophecy, and it says Mary kept all these things in her heart, and she knows that when she initiates Jesus to begin doing miracles, that starts a countdown for the end of her son's life. Basically, she's turning him back over to the world and to God and saying, "I release you." So it's Mary that stops Jesus initially starting, or pauses it, you could say. And it's Mary who resumes it and begins it and poses the question. And the other thing that this Catholic theologian said is, like, okay, who is the most powerful woman in Judaism, in ancient Judaism? And you would think it's like, oh, the wife of the king. It's like, no, 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 no. It's the mother of the king. And if you needed to get something done, whatever it is in ancient Judaism, you would go to the mother of the king, because the person who actually has the king's ear, no king is going to refuse his mother. You go to the mother of the king. And that's exactly why Catholics say the rosary, pray to Mary, but it's for Mary to petition the king. It's for Mary to go on our behalf to her son. And
Right.
and honestly, me growing up in Protestantism, because I grew up PCUSA, like, praying to Mary is not something that has come natural to me at all. But I deeply sense that it's one of the things that Catholicism has got absolutely right. Yeah, for all the reasons that you're outlining. So
So I want to jump back to something you said, because you said something about the feminine speaking first, right?
yeah, yeah,
Okay. The absolute unit that is the Menha record. Chapter one of their temple teaching. For just for background, Pa Eloe is the mother, and Si Eloe is the father, and they refer to each other as Elohim. So, the very beginning, Pa Eloe speaking. Ponder the deep, Elohim. Is it not a great question? That thing that you just said of setting the frame. Then Si Eloe says, look out into the deep, Elohim, and tell me what you see. Now, Pa Eloe, I see space there, space to fill, space to build, space to do a great thing. Long have I pondered the deep and wondered why it remains so dark and empty. Should it not be filled with light? Should it not be filled with wonder and beauty? Where we are, there is light and truth. Our own parents provided this for us, and we rose up by line and by precept to become like them. I'm sorry, I'm just reading this again for the first time after reading the Birkenau tablets, and there is a commonality here that is adding meaning to this right now as I read it. Why do we look out upon the deep and see emptiness? It is a thing that should not be. See Aloe speaking. We look upon where we are and see what is real. Out yonder, there is no one to see us. Indeed, there is no one to see at all. What need then has the deep of light and wonder and beauty? Our work is for the world in which we find ourselves. Why should we ask for more than what is? So, this is the beginning of their conversation about why they should have a creation. Um, Now, I find it amazing that observation you make about how it's the feminine that sets the frame, and this runs straight into something that I first heard a year ago when I went to the Book of Mormon Heartland / Ojibwe Outreach Conference, and that is this was an Ojibwe teaching, the feather teaching, and I hope I can do it justice because it's a teaching on the relationship between the masculine and the feminine, and uh, I believe the person I first heard it from was her name's Sherry Cardinal, and she taught it very well. But there, you have a feather, and you observe the feather, how there's a narrow side and a wide side to a feather. And the narrow side is the leading edge, and the wide side is the trailing edge. And in order for a feather to contribute to flight, what you need is for that narrow side to set the direction that the that in relationship to the air that it's going through, and it's actually the wider part of the feather that is doing the real lifting. And the feather teaching tells us that that narrow side that sets the direction is actually the feminine, which is very much what you were just saying about Mary guiding Jesus's life. And the wide side is the masculine, and that is the role of the masculine is to do the lifting that the feminine is not able to. And it gets into the whole thing of the strength of the woman is in her generations, and the strength of the man is just his strength, like the things that he can physically do. And you need the wisdom of the woman to help with, like, or even to guide decision making for making decisions that are in the best interest of her children. So this is another thing that is in the that first chapter of the Nemenha record. Uh, so as a little bit of background, um, the in the Book of Mormon, you have this story where you've got this king. His name is King Mosiah. He was a really good king. The king before him was a really good king. Like they taught the people to have good faith. They didn't tax the people. They actually worked for their own support instead of just living off of the people around them. And they observed that if it were possible that you could always have a good king, it would be fine to have kings. But you can't rely on that because the bad kings just have a really funny way of just showing up in very short order. You know, it's the Saul problem. Who in all of Israel is like unto Saul? And what does he try to do? He's trying to kill David in like not very long. So what uh, what Mosiah comes up with is a system of judges where you have lower judges and you have higher judges, and you know that there are some checks and balances. If one judge is misbehaving, other judges can be like, no, this isn't what we're going to do. So there's a sense of quorum and like self-regulation that's part of it. Um, we in in the Book of Mormon, we see that that system of government ends up basically with a unfortunate amount of corruption. And that's actually a big part of why it is that Hagoth takes his journey is they're trying to get away from the corruption and the things that are going on. And in that first in that book of Hagoth, which is just one long chapter, so it's not really broken up into chapters. In the book of Hagoth, uh, what they end up doing is they they start asking Hagoth if he will be their king, and he does the exact same thing Nephi did when after they had arrived. And he says, you know, really, guys, we don't need to have a king. Like that's not going to be a good thing for us. Even though Nephi didn't want to be a king, they still like called who came after him king, and it was kings all the way down until we get to King Benjamin and then King Mosiah that follows King after King Benjamin. Uh, but what Hagoth does, and what they recognize is this system of judges was corruptible, and so they decide to make an adjustment to how the system of judges works. And their adjustment is no man can just seek the office of being judge. The judges are still voted on by the people, but it is the mothers who do the nominating. And the reasoning, actually, I'll bet I could find it in just a very short moment. So here we have it's in Book of Hagoth, starting in 61. Now we have seen how even those chosen by the people to be judges might become unjust if those people fall into wickedness. Wherefore we chose and designated the mothers of our children as those who should elect the judges, and that no action would be decided by one judge, but by a council of judges. In this way, if the judges become unjust, it is only because the whole people have fallen into wickedness. For mothers of our children have always been meeker and more naturally prone to righteousness than our men. Verily, men have need of physical strength and will often become puffed up in that strength and will use it to rule over others. But the mother's strength is in her children. Wherefore do they the more often choose according to that which is better for the little ones? This is wisdom, and because of this, we have seen less strife than the Nephiha in the Wayna Stitzpa. So their whole thing is uh, because mothers are going to make better long-term decisions. That's why they're the first pass at picking leaders. Now they have other things that go on and how they pick their leaders. They have things like you have the maximum size for a city in their society is 150 to 200 families. Once you get up to that size, you have to split off and form another city down the way a little bit. And
So they deliberately Dunbar
interesting
number.
things like that.
Yeah.
What's that?
So they deliberately set a Dunbar number.
Uh huh. There's actually a whole book in here about how one of their cities got completely destroyed because they violated that. Because there's something magical about when you limit your community size. Like they never stopped having all things in common with each other. Like that was the order of things when they were on the boats traveling to the land northward. But after that, they just continued the same social order. And that rule of no more than 150 to 200 families was in service of the fact, and it is written, I forget where. I've read a number of different things in the Menha. It is written somewhere that it's because for a community to have all things in common, if you get larger than that size of community, you lose the ability for everyone to be able to see and verify the need for the things that they are helping to produce. You economics is still economics. It's specialization still matters. Even in, what we would call a primitive culture, you have people who will specialize in different tasks. You will have people who make pots, you will have people who make tools. And if you're a person who makes these things, you can see, oh yeah, there's a few people who need things. I'll make this many this week. And like that's your part of the community. And the people who do the farming will say, "Oh yeah, well we do need to make sure we get enough food for everyone." They're making stuff for everyone else, and like they're making some of the tools that I need. So, like it's a very good reciprocal situation. And
It reminds me of the Amish.
uh-huh.
They draw the line at yeah. What would be the Amish equivalent with modern technology? Like what's the like? I thought to myself, like, how many people do you need to run a relatively modern and safe sewer system or electrical grid? You know, uh, all the big infrastructure stuff.
Hmm.
Like, what's the minimum necessary number of families to yeah? Sorry.
I mean, that's a great question. And like what design questions do you answer differently based off of trying to design solutions to those problems for limited community sizes? Because there's a lot of stuff that we solve the way we do because we're aggregating so much into such large cities. And like that takes a level of unity that we simply can't produce in our society right now. Uh, we don't have the patience for unity. Like you unity requires a lot of patience because you have to
Like,
be willing to wait for the consensus.
yeah,
And
tolerance and patience and a lack of convenience for the individual.
and a an increase in recognition that the other, whoever the other is also a divine being like you. Like that's when I see identity politics or anything that's identitarian in nature, it is actually working 100% against that sense that there is a divine nature in the other person that you're talking to. Because it's, well, you're actually less than me, is kind of where it ends up being. And like, you use people will use their identities as justifications for why they are either better, or why, you know, oh, well, you need to recognize what's happened to me and my people, instead of everyone saying, stuff's been messy.
Have you been following the PVK Christian nationalism stuff? The fact that he's not personally concerned about Christian nationalism trends. Have you been following that at all?
I haven't,
Yeah.
but
Well, he basically says, I'm going to probably botch his argument here, but that the United States is so pluralistic that there's no one church that dominates, that we can't really adopt a Christian nationalist position uh, because the different theologies and the different groups. Well, first of all, the United, like, what is the Church of the United States? You know, there, there's, we have a cathedral, but it's Sam Tiedemann would say Unitarianism, or like Harvard Divinity School Unitarianism is like the official moralistic therapeutic deism. Um, but the reason that I do think it's more of a threat is what seems to me to be uniting is the political. The political is uniting because we have a common enemy. The political is uniting because we have a common existential threat. The political is uniting because of necessity. Um, or, yeah, for any number of reasons, the political is uniting. And then I see religion being a good excuse, meaning to take political action. So you could think of the Christian nationalism that was the container of the United States of the last, post World War II, let's say. And that Christian nationalism was something like treat everyone kindly, nicely, respect everyone's beliefs no matter what, give everyone maximal freedom and individuality to pursue their own understanding of happiness, whatever that is. And so now it's no. We need to fix the problems in society. Politically, we have the will to fix whatever the fix is. We're going to remove the problem, or we're going to clamp down, or we're going to top down. We're going to fix the issues, and as a instrumental reason or for fixing, we can say good Christian values, but it doesn't have to be evangelical Christian values, right? It doesn't have to be LDS Christian values. It doesn't have to be Roman Catholic. It's just we do the politics first, and then pick the Christian nationalist God of your own understanding to enforce the will of God upon the people. And that's what I see as the danger, sort of like so it's not explicitly Christian nationalist in these um, confessional ways. It's not
mm-hmm.
confessional, but it's just we implement these political. Yeah. Anyway, so the thoughts on that.
So, okay, this is extremely interesting for me, um, because where to start, man? Where to start? Um, we could go all the way back to Cain. That would be workable. Um, we could get into the Gadiantons of the Book of Mormon and the warning about them. That is a specific warning to people who live on this land in any time during or after the Book of Mormon. So now, uh, so okay, we have the Christ, right? And How does he redeem?
Through his suffering and death on the cross.
All right. So he doesn't redeem with violence?
Nope. I mean, he kicks him out of the temple, but that's about it.
He makes them leave, yes. Uh
Yeah. And even that, it's the minimal necessary force to clean up the temple.
yeah, knocking people's tables over, kind of scaring them with a whip. um but yeah. Uh all right. What do we celebrate every 4th of July?
Our successful rebellion against the evil British Empire.
Might I suggest a just slight
An
variation on
alternative
that?
interpretation. Sure.
Yeah. We are celebrating our salvation through redemptive violence.
Interesting. Interesting. Yeah.
Salvation through redemptive violence is doomed because the fact that there was violence involved means that violence is required on an ongoing basis.
All right. I'm going to steelman my Americanism.
Do it.
So you would have let the Confederate States go and let them continue their enslavement.
So this gets difficult. And why
Yeah.
I say it gets difficult is I don't think the enslavement would have continued to today. I
Yeah.
think it would have ended some other way. Now, what also ended when the Civil War ended was the voluntary nature of the union between the states. Before the Civil War, there was a sense that states could leave the Union if it wasn't working for them. And after the Civil War, it was very clear that states could not leave the Union if it wasn't working for them.
The rise of the supremacy of the federal government over state government.
Yep. And so we have a system that is based off of you can't leave or there's violence. And that is a rot that will go, that is, well, already in the core. And we have added to it the rot of violating economic law. And by economic law, I mean the very nature of how economics works. Now, I'm going to out myself as an Austrian here, and not a Keynesian. Uh, it is doomed to collapse. It cannot stand forever. When you loan money into circulation, the math does not work for paying that back ever. But somehow it still carries interest that has to be paid. And there comes a point where there is no way to model that mathematically that's going to work.
Well, it only works mathematically so much as the future is larger than the present. We've been
And that
reliant
does
on
not work.
we've been reliant on exponential technological growth and I would say linear human population growth. But I think both of those are flattening and going to I well, thoughts on that.
I'm I'm going to assert further that we can learn things. Now, this is once again, all these things that I read are orienting for me. Uh, we have the Book of Mormon that talks about the collapse of two civilizations. So you've got the Nephite civilization, and you also have the Jaredite civilization that collapsed and went away before the Nephites even arrived. And they found records about that. So now what's interesting is in the Nemenhah record, you get a lot more flavor about what happened around the end of the war. Because Moroni, who led the armies at the end of the Great Nephite Lamanite War, he went home to the Nemenha people, and he's got a whole book in the Nemenha record. It starts at about page 300. And he talks about the real trouble in the Nephite Lamanite War is that the Lamanites had become too accustomed to living off of plundering other people. Now, I think there are arguments to be made about our foreign policy and what the odds are that we are living off of plundering other nations in the way that we protect our interests around the globe. Now, I am not skilled enough to present a map of that, but you don't go and blow people up at great expense unless there's a return on investment. And so that it is my assertion that we carry on the work of violence in our country that we do because it's profitable in at least, being able to get beneficial
And
trade.
that was
I,
running. That was the running Iraq War narrative with Halliburton and all of that.
yeah, and it's
And
really good at enriching a few people, but you
yeah,
know,
well, I've hypothesized that one of the reasons we have been able to, when I say we, I mean the United States government, have been able to uh, print so much money for the last 50 100 years, um, is, well, especially the last 20 years, is that the when we're printing dollars, basically we're expanding the world money supply, versus because the United States is, for the most part, is the the source at which all other countries and currencies stabilize off of that.
Mhm.
So we might say, well, our GDP, our total debt, I think it's like 30 trillion now, something like that. I lost track of the number. Um, but you would look at that debt number and say, well, the 30 trillion is like almost as much as our GDP, every year or something like that. Um, but I think one of the reasons it hasn't been worse is because we're really comparing that to world GDP, or everyone around the globe that's relying on the dollar as a source. But even that has its limits,
Mhm.
because the United States is probably a third of that. Yeah. So,
I mean, that stuff gets into like that's the kind of foreign policy stuff that our government has to maintain in order to keep demand up for the money that is otherwise becoming worthless. You need people to need dollars to buy oil so that there's a reason for dollars to exit the American economy. Because if they are not exiting the American economy, we are going to have even worse inflation.
yeah.
Because it's every country that you've seen hyperinflation in, like they're a closed system and they're printing money. We're at least trying to keep the windows open so that money's going out and it's not all concentrating right here for hyperinflation. But that gets into that whole we're violating economic law. Like these
Hmm.
things have properties and we are violating them hard.
Well, what do you think? What is the soft landing? That's the way I'm going to frame the question.
Um, I mean, the hopeful answer is that we figure out how to stop living on printed money. Like we have to figure out what we're going to give up. And quite frankly, I think one of the things we have to give up is using our best resources to go overseas and blow people up. Like it's a double whammy because it's increasing demand for real materials for making things and paying for that increased demand with printed money. Like it's making things more expensive and making the supplies for what we actually need here at home less available. And so, like, of course, everything's getting more expensive. So, yeah, maybe giving up war would be a good first step. And, you know,
I mean, I think you're explaining in no small part the rise of Trump in that, that was a centerpiece of his first term, like no more stupid wars, build the wall is the thing that takes all the energy out of the room. But the no more stupid wars, I think, was that was the thing that really sunk Jeb Bush and traditional neocons. That's exactly what you're talking about. Yeah.
yeah, well, I mean, we can't have nice things because we're taking our best stuff.
Well, all the Bernie bros that are very anti-war, they jumped over to Trump when it was Trump Hillary for that reason, or many of them.
Yeah, it's a mess, is what it is. Um, but at the end of the day, we have to we have to find a way to be okay with less. And very unfortunately, one of the things that probably has to go in order for us to have a soft landing is also our rampant consumerism.
Yeah, I mean, what do you think of Peterson and Pareto distributions and just how? Because one thing that I've been thinking a lot about is since 2020 or even before that, but like all of the financial gains, virtually all, it's like 90% of the financial gains post COVID went to the 1% of wealth and income. There's 90% of those financial gains. And what's interesting is I see the identity politics of the last 12 years or so being so what happened. I think this is right. I forgot what podcast I heard this on, but you had uh, in the around 2010, right after the 2007 2008 financial crisis, you had the Occupy Wall Street movement, which is very class based, very world finance centered, and right after that, and there was really no accountability for the credit swaps and the what are they called packaging of mortgages and then marking those up and all of the little lies that were told during the financial crisis 2007 2008. There really wasn't any accountability. I mean, there were some CEOs that lost their jobs and there were obviously major firms that closed and all that, but there wasn't really a come to Jesus moment of like what were the things that went awry here that led us to this place in the first place. And instead the big banks got bigger. That's what happened. Is
Mm-hmm.
the too big to fail got even bigger after 2008. And I remember that. I was a young kid out of college, and I had a job, and luckily I kept that job. But it was a rough time. And so okay, so you have all this like class based resentment coming out of that, and then we pivot to identity politics. I think Trayvon Martin and the rise of Facebook and social media around 2012 is when I marked that pivot, when it really started. And I think social media was driving factor. And I think what seemed to happen then is like corporate America jumped into the identity politics melee, and I think they did that because they sensed it was safer for corporate interests than the continuing class-based politics and resentment politics that existed, especially with the financial crisis after that. It was a way of taking the the focus off of the class stuff and the separation of wealth and income. And I keep thinking to myself that when the identity politics stuff really runs out, the thing that the populist left and the right both have in common, well, they have two things, but the main thing that's relevant to this that they both have in common is the mistrust of capitalism, corporate greed, that top, basically the ownership class. And like the Bernie Sanders wave is no weaker than it was. It's only the only thing that separates them is they're about evenly split left and right, you know. Um, What are your thoughts on that dynamic changing, and or what and what's
So,
the answer to the Pareto distribution and global, globalization being inevitable for the consolidation of wealth and income in fewer and fewer people?
okay, this is I want to clarify a thing that I've mentioned as a name. Um, let's talk about the Gadianton robbers and how this group from the Book of Mormon has been something that orients how I understand our society today. So Gadianton is this guy who basically it's said of him that he digs up the secret oaths of old that were the oaths that went all the way back to Cain. Because this is from the understanding of the story of Cain, where he conspired to kill his brother, and in order to make sure that he was not found out, he conspired with others to keep the fact secret. Uh, and so there's this general idea that people working in secret can work against the interests of others and kill as necessary to gain power over other people. Now, how this develops in the Book of Mormon is you have this band of Gadianton, which basically they take over the government. They end up, people who are all in on this end up in various positions in government to the point that they control it. When they want somebody to not end up being guilty of a crime, they have enough control to make that happen. If they want to make sure someone disappears, they have enough control to do that. At a time when the chief judge is not wicked, uh, they, you know, kill someone after taking them into custody and say, "Oh, you mean you wanted to have a trial before I'm sorry about that, but he's already gone, so
Osama
you
bin
know,
Laden, anyone?
yeah." So this is how the band of Gadianton works. Now, when you ask about a soft landing, I have no comfort for you. And the reason is also from stories of the Book of Mormon, because in the Book of Mormon, in the lead up to uh, the birth of Jesus Christ, number one, he's not there. He's they they make it clear in all their prophecy leading up to that point, he's not going to be here, but we know he's going to come, and he's going to have his ministry back in the place where we came from before we came here. And so in that lead up, these Gadiantons, they get more and more control over the government. But what starts happening is like you have one who wants to become the chief judge, so he murders the chief judge. And then it happens again. And there gets a point, I want to say it's on the second time that the chief judge is murdered. Chief judge is basically governor, president, whatever. Um, when this happens, there's people don't understand, or at least I don't feel like people have a real sense that this whole thing of having a government is like a game. And you know how there's a point in every game where if you play it badly enough or unfairly enough, someone just flips the table over and goes home? Or worse, flips the table over and starts punching you? That's what happens in the Book of Mormon when they don't get this corruption under control. The whole government collapses and it just turns into regional tribes. Everyone according to what size family they and kin they have that want to join with them. And I am very much here to tell you that is the future we have in store if we don't figure out how to rein in our politicians and get them to stop printing our money into oblivion and just like using it to maintain their power over us. Like that's that is set in stone according to the prophecy in the Book of Mormon. That's what we've got coming. So now we also have other things like you've got the eighth fire prophecy of some of the Native Americans. That also says it's the end of the our time.
Eighth
Um,
fire, that's interesting. So the eighth day would be regarded as the day of resurrection, the new week.
so, and there's also the white buffalo calf woman prophecy that they say was fulfilled last year. Um, that also indicates that there is a coming time of peace. Um, but as I understand the scriptures, we're going to have a period of time where it's the wicked killing the wicked, and it's all the people who want to fight, they're going to kill each other. So I don't know, man. I'm I am trying to make sure that I am as much in line with our God as possible. And I am waiting patiently on his guidance. But this is what I see when I read all these things. And I like the more when I speak poorly of war, um, and yeah, when I speak poorly of war, like there's a lot of Mormons who don't realize that this is an anti-war book. It shows two civilizations that are completely destroyed, millions of people whose bodies are heaped upon the earth because they didn't give up war. The Nemenha record over here, it's more clearly anti-war. Like you can miss it. Like in the Book of Mormon, you can be reading it and be like, "Oh, it's a good thing they finally won this time," and not realize that war was part of the problem. In the Birkenhall tablets, the in their creation story, the very fact that there needed to be a special creation with a special savior comes from the fact that there was a war and children of the Elohim were impacted by it. And by fighting in that war, it brought their souls into disunity, and they could no longer continue the path that they had been on, learning line upon line with the little endowment of power that they had received from the Elohim. And they they had to go through some variety of corrective experience. And this world that we're living in is us participating in that corrective experience and trying to be reunified through the atonement. But the entire cause, according to these tablets, of having to do that and deviate from the learning line upon line that, was just part of being, you know, beings that were hanging out with the Elohim, is because there was a war. And now we had internal conflict from having participated in that war. And we had in our hearts the desire to fight and the desire to identify enemies and the need to defeat our enemies. And that's why it's so notable to me now that Christ is inviting us to peace and to love our enemies and to do good to them that hate us. Because everyone that we could identify as an enemy was someone in that war that we were fighting on the same side as. But some are listening to those that we were fighting against and are picking their side again. So, like, it's, it, I still get mad and I still, have that impulse to want to fight sometimes. but I am seeing it more and more as not how to come and be with the Elohim and how to participate with them. So so when we get into our class conflict or our identitarian conflict, like identity politics is a it is an exquisite trap. It is a trap to get us to identify each other as enemies so that we don't identify real enemies that are exploiting us all. But even among the billionaire class, like there at the very end of the temple teaching, there's a story. Um, I don't know if you would be game to hear a paragraph or two of this story.
Sure.
Uh, but we've got so this is a bunch of of little things talking about people who uh you know originated back right after the time of Cain and whatnot. uh which in this this is northern Germanic in origin. uh Oddly enough, Cain is actually named Loke. uh they refer to the son of the Elohim as Thunaraz. So anything that is Norse adjacent is yes, there's reasons for that. But here, there it's talking about things that have happened and returning people returning to peace. And it says here there was Vegetius who was king over the land which had become Njord, so the people of the Norse. And this Vegetius was a wicked man and had many wives and concubines and hoarded much wealth. And he was known as the dragon of his for his fierceness in battle, and he conquered many of the lands round about, insomuch that he became king of many territories. So it was that a boy came from the south whose name was Azez. Now this Azez was a mighty and great seer, insomuch that he touched the tree and became Vioneer. Vioneer is what we seek to become in working with Jesus and returning to the Father. Became Vioneer at the age of 7. And when he had done this, he led a mission into the northern parts. He went into the very courts of the king of the Neords, who was Vegetus. Now this Ezez contended with Vegetus and taught him, insomuch that Vegetus was converted and sent a decree throughout the land of the truthfulness of the words of Ezez, and caused them to be taught in the streets. And this he did as he himself touched the tree and became a seer unto the Elohim. And he went down into the street and cried repentance unto his people, insomuch that all were converted, and they numbered in total 40,000 souls of the Neords. And Vegetus dismantled the throne and became like unto his people, and dwelt in a tent the remainder of his days. Now this is the likeness which we teach our people in the temples, for we have kept a book of generations and a book of remembrances among us, and we have all the teachings and doings our forebears even back to Svemaz. And this that we might know that we were descended from they who became Vioneer, and they being descended from they who be and yeah, being descended from they who became Vioneer, we know that we may also become Vioneer, as well as return again unto Athlaz, and reunite with them all as our forebears, and with Thunaraz, and with the Elohim themselves. Thus it is. So, what I find interesting in this particular thing that I read it for the first time just last night, um, is this vision that anyone can turn back to follow the Elohim. Anyone. Like this sounds like the worst of our Gadiantans being converted. And in this case, it was by a freaking child. 7 years old, becomes a seer, and he goes and he teaches this king who had conquered many lands.
Yeah, it reminds me of Jonah and Nineveh. Nineveh's like the worst city, you know, just and they repent. And Jonah's pissed off that they repent. Actually, he's angry at God afterwards. You know, he's like, "What the heck?"
Well, and I find it so interesting that he it specifically says that he dismantles his throne and he goes on to just live in a tent. So like the thing that we have to give up is we have to give up having people who are elevated above others and who are living off of the aggregate of others. And the easiest way to give that up is for people to say, you know what, I'm not going to do that anymore. Now, some people get mad and decide, well, we don't want to wait for that. We're going to pull out the guillotine. Uh, and you what's interesting is like you see it in the Bolshevik Revolution, like this idea that anyone who has anything, well, we're actually just justified in going and taking it from them, as opposed to someone saying, I don't need all of this. I can give it away.
Yeah,
And the I don't need all of this, I can give it away comes from connection to God, as opposed to, a fear that you're never going to have enough, so you have to gather more. Because when you're in relationship with God, you start to have that confidence. It's like, no, no, this is going to be okay. I'm going to have enough for my needs, and I can accept that I don't have more because I'm not afraid that I'm not going to have enough.
yeah. I think that's the subordination of the left brain to the right brain in Ian McGilchrist terms, or a prioritization of the mystical or faith over the pragmatic. Yeah, I very much resonate with that. Well, Shaun, it's been a great conversation. Is there anything we didn't touch on that you want to make sure we hit on?
Good grief.
Yeah,
I think we touched just about everything.
we
Like
did.
I
And a
think
number
we've
of
run the
third rails.
gamut of
Yeah,
my like I had made some notes about the things that are meaningful to me,
yeah,
and I think we hit a bunch of them. You know, like I guess I had a note here also about Jacob's ladder and the importance of like how we minister to each other, and how, it's yes, Jacob has the dream where he sees the angels ascending and descending. But what I also have gathered from the things that I have read and the things that I have experienced is that we're already on the ladder. We are participants in this thing. We're not just like going, oh, hopefully someday if I'm good enough, I can get on the ladder. No, we have an experience with the divine. We have had something that has drawn us in their direction. That means we are on the ladder. And there are people who are further down the ladder who need help coming up. And there are people further up the ladder that can invite us to join them and help show us the way to get closer. And it is crucial to us that we figure out how to like appreciate where we are in our walk, in our return to the Elohim, and where we are in relation to the Christ that they have, set apart for us to help us through this journey. Um, and to like live out that pattern of, they have assigned to him the responsibility to help us, And he will, from time to time, give us responsibilities to help or opportunities to help others. And, like salvation is a group project. And one of the things that we really mess up in a lot of American churches is everybody's acting like it's each individual on their own having their walk. And while there is an individual element and everyone has to do their individual part to have that relationship or be in that relationship, the goals are group goals. If I am to believe what's in the creation story in these tablets, which I have thoroughly been enjoying. In fact, I've been helping him work out a better typesetting for the next printing uh, on these. Um, if if the creation story in these tablets is to be believed, the whole thing is about trying to recover as much of the group as possible to return them back into that place of unity and back into that place of learning line upon line with the rest of the children of the Elohim as we try to become like they are, as like that little bit that I referred to in the Nemenha, where they talk like that's why it stuck out to me so much, where she had said, you know, that we may have them learn line upon line as we did with our parents.
Mm.
Like I know not everybody's down with this infinite regression of gods. Like I get that. Um, but there's something freeing about it too, because when there's a cosmos that's big enough for the Elohim to not be the only ones that exist, that also gives us a pattern of we can come together in unity and not all have to be in the same church. Like
Mm.
we can come from different traditions that look to the same God, and they love us enough that it's okay with them for us to be in relationship with them in the way that we have learned to be in relationship with them, and we don't have to colonize each other into our own specific churches. They they have been with the indigenous, they have been with the various groups. In fact, in the book of Vofen here in the tablets, it talks about the church to the south uh, that couldn't stand that anyone believed slightly differently from them, who was exactly the so it's once again it's interesting. And so everything that I've learned is leading me to the idea that we need to be prepared to all come together as peers in a circle, and the indigenous are going to have something, and you know the LDS are going to have something, the you know even the Eastern religions are going to have something, and like we're going to have to piece it all together to figure it out in order to really come to know the Elohim and really be reconciled with the Christ, because everyone's got a piece, and we just got to stop thinking each of our individual churches has it all and has a lock on exactly what is in the cosmos.
Oh,
So
it's
yeah,
beautiful.
I think that sums up where I'm at.
Yeah. Your vision reminds me of a uh, prophecy by Saint John Bosco, who's the patron saint of my church, the Salesians. Do you mind if I show this really quick?
Do it.
I'm going to share my screen. If I can figure out how to share. Share. There. Now I got it. Cool. All right. There we go. Hopefully you can see that prophecy of the two columns. So Saint John Bosco, he started the Salesians, which is my church, which is an order within Roman Catholicism. But um, try to picture yourselves with me on the seashore, or better still, on an outlying cliff with no other land in sight. The vast expanse of water is covered with a formidable array of ships in battle formation, prows fitted with sharp spear-like beaks capable of breaking through any defense. All are heavily armed with cannons, incendiary bombs, firearms of all sorts, even books, and are heading toward one stately ship mightier than them all. As they try to close in, they try to ram it, set it afire, and they cripple it as much as possible. And there's an illustration of the battle. The stately vessel is shielded by a flotilla escort. Winds and waves are with the enemy. In this midst of this endless sea, two solid columns a short distance apart soar high in the sky. One is surmounted by a statue of the Immaculate Virgin, at whose feet a large inscription reads, Help of Christians. The other, far loftier and sturdier, supports a communion host of proportionate size and bears beneath it the inscription, Salvation of Believers. The flagship commander, the Roman pontiff, seeing the enemy's fury and his auxiliary ships' very grave predicament, summons his captains to a conference. However, as they discuss their strategy, a furious storm breaks out. They must return to their ships. When the storm abates, the Pope summons his captains as the flagship keeps on its course. But the storm rages again. Standing at the helm, the Pope strains every muscle to steer his ship between the two columns, whose summit hangs many anchors and strong hooks linked to chains. The entire enemy fleet closes in to intercept and sink the flagship at all costs. They bombard it with everything they have, books and pamphlets, incendiary bombs, firearms, cannons. The battle rages even more furious. Beaked prows ram the flagship again and again, but to no avail. As unscathed and undaunted, it keeps on its course. At times a formidable ram splinters a gaping hole into its hull, but immediately a breeze from the two columns instantly seals the gash. Meanwhile, the enemy cannons blow up, firearms and beaks fall to pieces, ships crack up and sink to the bottom. In blind fury, the enemy takes hand-to-hand combat, cursing and blaspheming. Suddenly, the Pope falls seriously wounded. He is instantly helped up, but struck down a second time, dies. A shout of victory rises from the enemy, and wild rejoicing sweeps their ships. But no sooner is the Pope dead than another takes his place. The captains of the auxiliary ships selected him so quickly that the news of the Pope's death coincides with that of his successor's election. The enemy's self-assurance wanes. Breaking through all resistance, the new Pope steers his ship safely between the two columns and moors it to the two columns, first to the one surmounted by the host, and then to the other topped by the statue of the Virgin. At this point, something unexpected happens. The enemy ships panic and disperse, colliding with and scuttling each other. Some auxiliary ships, which had gallantly fought alongside their flagship, are the first to tie up at the two columns. Many others, which had fearfully kept far away from the fight, stand still, cautiously waiting until the wrecked enemy ships vanish under the waves. Then they too head for the two columns, tie up at the swinging hooks, and ride safe and tranquil beneath their flagship. And a great calm now covers the sea. Yeah. Many interpret St. John, and in conclusion to this dream, very grave trials await the church. What we have suffered so far is almost nothing compared to what is going to happen. The enemies of the church are symbolized by the ships which strive their utmost to sink the flagship. Only two things can save us in such a grave hour: devotion to Mary and frequent communion. Let us do our very best to use these two means and have others use them everywhere. Many interpret St. John Bosco's vision as regarding the trials the church has endured and is continuing to endure at the dawn of the third millennium, namely rampant secularism and apostasy, which has led to attacks against the church and her teachings. St. John Bosco, pray for us. But it's a particular story which has stuck with me, and it's got some of the imagery, not exactly, but it's got a lot of the imagery that you just went through. And I've also
Yeah,
had it
no,
in my
it's
mind as the TLC is regarded as this flotilla of channels,
yeah, that actually lines up quite a bit with like in essence of what it is that I've been talking about. There is no comfort I have for you. It's a time of trouble.
Yeah.
And things will be sinking. But some of the things that are going to sink are things that are not in alignment with Christ. And so of course they got to go. Like, how do you have the end of all nations associated with his kingdom coming without watching nations collapse? Like, how else is that supposed to happen? Do you expect the nations to just be like, "Oh, sorry, we didn't mean to be using all this power against everyone. We should just give all that power back." Like, you know, I wouldn't say no to that, but it's not in the nature of people who are used to using violence to gain power over each other to just hand the power back. So, but yeah, that's that imagery makes a lot of sense. That's what I when I hear people talking about fleeing to Zion for peace in the coming years, like that's very much the same essence and feeling that I appreciate from those kinds of ideas.
Well, it's been excellent talking to you, Shaun. I really enjoyed this, and I wish you and your family uh, very well. And I'm sure we'll talk again. So hope we, yeah, do it again as the world continues to unfold before us. I think there'll be a need for more of these connections and check-ins. And yeah, I'm still trying to get a sense of even why I feel so called into this weird internet space. But I think you're similar to me in that at the same time that we're kind of building the relationships in the community locally, keep one foot tied into a network that's beyond all that, where especially where we feel
Right.
that the people within that network are aimed in the right direction. So
Yeah, there's certainly something about having friends in other places so that when there is a need outside of your community, you have somewhere to look.
mhm. Yeah, indeed.
So
If you're ever in New
this has been a
Orleans,
lot
let
of
me know. Yeah.
great. This has been a lot of fun. I really appreciate the opportunity to, come and talk and, not worry about whether I'm accidentally taking over somebody else's thoughts too much or,
No.
somebody else's direction too much.
Yeah.
Uh, I'm always trying to be respectful of that when I've jumped on streams with Chad,
Yeah. Yeah. No,
because you
very
know
much
it's
so.
it's not my space, and so it's not mine to like completely overrun with all this stuff we just talked about.
I've never met a rude Mormon. I'm sure they're out there, but
Oh, they
I've
exist.
yet to I've yet to meet one.
They definitely exist.
Yeah.
But they're not going to show up in respectful places like this
Yeah.
and engage in the kind of conversation we've had
Yeah.
before because they're going to show up and be kind of a jerk and get kicked out in the first 5 minutes.
Gotcha.
Uh, but they exist. Don't you worry.
I believe you. Well, thank you, Shaun. Hang out, and I'm gonna stop recording.